Exercise W44. Practice responding to the integrated writing task. 1. Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
Being able to communicate using language is one of our human species' most important abilities. Some scientists claim that apes, like humans, also use languages. There are many studies into ape acquisition of language, some famous, such as the Coco studies. But are these animals really acquiring language? We really haven't done enough research to address the question of how and when humans started using language, but we can compare human and ape communicative abilities to determine whether the claims about ape language are valid. First, for behavior to be called language, it must be communicative. In other words, the signers must be able to use language creatively. They should be able to take turns in conversation, must sign spontaneously rather than as a response to drilling or coercion, and must be able to comment on interesting phenomena. If you think about what the apes have accomplished in communicating, these criteria have not been met. However, according to the proponents of ape communication, the animals do meet these criteria. They maintain that those of us who question the validity of this research have never worked with apes. However, we wonder how much influence their probable emotional attachment to an animal has on the conclusions they reach. Is there a solution in sight that would put an end to this controversy? Yes, there might be. Studies are being undertaken at the neurophysiological level. Through the use of modern brain scanning techniques, such as MRI, we may be able to get a better picture of the brain activity of a healthy human during communication and an ape while supposedly communicating. A comparison of these scans should give us an insight into whether apes really do communicate.
Summarize the points made in the lecture you just heard, explaining how they cast doubt on the points made in the reading. Two. Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
Okay, the question of why the current is so important to the young salmon was asked, and I'd like to respond to this. Smolts, the young salmon, hatch from their eggs in fresh water. Before the large-scale construction of dams, the young fish use the strong current from the spring runoff of melting snow to get to the sea in between 6 and 20 days. It's necessary for them to reach the sea within this window of time because during these days, the smolt's bodies undergo the physiological changes for adaptation to salt water. The net result of the slow current is that many of the young fish don't survive the trip, which can now take up to, 60 days to reach the sea. What happens is their bodies have adapted to saltwater conditions, but they're still in fresh water. Obviously, with fewer fish surviving the trip to the sea, there are fewer adult salmon to migrate back up the rivers for breeding. The solutions to the problem that have been presented have not been very successful. Many scientists think that the artificial method of getting the fish to the sea by barge has killed more fish than it saves. The suggestions some people have made concerning increasing the flow rate temporarily by either releasing water from upstream reservoirs or reducing the water level in all linked reservoirs for the period of smolt migration would be a partial solution to the declining salmon numbers. Unfortunately, both of these proposals have met with criticism from the power companies that manage the dams.
Summarize the points made in the lecture you just heard, explaining how they support the points made in the reading. Three. Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
Okay, so you all know something about DDT and its apparent environmental risks. But these risks are not necessarily valid. The evidence that DDT led to population declines of various birds of prey, the bald eagle, for instance, has come under criticism. Apparently, the bald eagle populations were in decline well before the widespread use of DDT. On the contrary, in 1960, that's about 15 years after the introduction of DDT, observers were reporting a rise in bald eagle numbers. Similar results have been found among other high food chain birds. Brown pelicans, for example, reached their lowest number before the introduction of DDT. The fact is they were hunted to near extinction. I've found studies showing that this bird, as well as the peregrine falcon, actually experienced no difficulty in reproducing during the DDT years. So, what about the evidence that DDT led to eggshell thinning? Unfortunately, the experiments associating DDT with this phenomenon involved doses massively higher than could ever be encountered in the wild. Even then, the degree of thinning was less than that found in eggs in the wild. In other words, the evidence shows that eggshell thinning and DDT are not correlated. However, other substances are. For example, oil spills, lead and mercury poisoning, and other factors such as stress from noise, fear, or excitement may be tied to the eggshell thinning. Even the human cancer scare seems to have been exaggerated. Again, several studies show that there may be no link between DDT and cancer at all. Research into DDT as a pesticide has indicated that overuse of the pesticide can result in its loss of effectiveness against insect-borne diseases. But responsible use is an effective method of fighting the spread of malaria, and its reintroduction should be seriously reconsidered.
Summarize the points made in the lecture you just heard, explaining how they cast doubt on the points made in the reading.